Hannah sat at her desk, rubbing her temples as she finished the last of her reports. It had been another long and stressful day at the real estate company where she worked as an assistant manager. She had been pushing herself for months, hoping to secure a major project that could lead to her long-awaited promotion. But tonight, all she wanted was to relax and unwind. She grabbed her phone and called her boyfriend Sam, like she always did after work. The video call rang but didn't connect. She tried again, still nothing. Frustrated, she sighed and leaned back in her chair. After a moment of hesitation, she decided to send him something special, something to remind him of what he was missing. With a playful smile, she took 4 private pictures of herself, then opened her messaging app. "Hey Siri, send my last 4 pictures to my boyfriend," she said, absent-mindedly, as she walked into the bathroom to take a shower. Siri responded almost instantly. "Yes, I'm sending your last 4 pictures to your boss, Fred." Hannah froze mid-step. A chill shot down her spine as she whipped around, heart hammering. "No, no, no, no," she gasped, rushing to her phone. Her hands trembled as she unlocked it and navigated to her messages. The damage was done. The photos had been sent to her boss, Fred Carter. Worse, they had already been marked as red. Hannah felt her knees weaken. Panic clawed at her chest. This is a mistake. A terrible mistake, she thought frantically. She immediately tried to delete the message, but it was too late. She could only pray that Fred would ignore it, delete it, or pretend it never happened. But deep down, she knew that wasn't going to happen. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind spiraled with terrifying thoughts. What if Fred uses this against me? What if he blackmails me? What if I lose my job? She tossed and turned in bed, replaying the disastrous moment over. By morning, her stomach was in knots. She forced herself to get ready and headed to the office. As she walked in, her phone buzzed with a message from Fred. "Come to my office." Her blood ran cold. She hesitated, contemplating if she should ignore the message and pretend nothing had happened, but she knew she had no choice. Taking a deep breath, she straightened her blouse, held her head high, and made her way to his office. As she stepped inside, Fred was sitting at his desk, his fingers drumming on the table. He looked up, a smirk playing on his lips. "Good morning, Hannah," he said smoothly. "I assume you know why I called you here?" Hannah swallowed hard, trying to keep her composure. "Yes, sir," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. Fred leaned back in his chair, unlocking his phone. With a few taps, he turned the screen toward her. Displayed clearly were the very pictures she had accidentally sent. Hannah's heart stopped. "I have a little proposition for you," Fred said, his smirk widening. Hannah's heart pounded as she stared at the screen of Fred's phone. There they were, her private pictures, clear as day. Her face burned with shame, and her hands balled into fists at her sides. Fred leaned forward, his smirk widening. "I assume you didn't mean to send these to me," he said casually, as if they were discussing an everyday work matter. Hannah swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay calm. "Sir, it was a mistake. I meant to send them to my boyfriend. Please delete them," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Fred let out a low chuckle, shaking his head. "Oh, I don't think I'll be doing that," he said. "See, Hannah, I've been watching you for a while. You're smart, hard-working and ambitious, and now you've given me a little leverage." Her stomach twisted. "Leverage?" she echoed, her voice trembling. Fred put his phone down and folded his hands. "The board has been considering giving you the lead role on a major project," he said. "You've worked hard for it, haven't you?" Hannah stiffened. "Yes, sir," she said cautiously. "Well," Fred continued, "I want that project, and I'm giving you a simple choice. You go to the board and tell them you don't want it. Recommend me instead. If you do that, I'll keep these pictures to myself. No one will ever know." Hannah felt like the walls were closing in on her. She had worked tirelessly for months to prove herself worthy of leading this project. It was her ticket to a promotion, her chance to finally make a name for herself in the company. And now, Fred was trying to take it away. She clenched her fists. "Sir, this isn't fair," she whispered. "You know how much I've sacrificed for this project. You can't do this." Fred's smirk faded and his expression turned cold. He picked up his phone and tapped the screen. "Fair?" he repeated. "I don't think you're in a position to argue about fairness, Hannah." He turned the phone toward her again. Her pictures were still there. And she knew what he was implying. Tears stung at her eyes, but she fought them back. She had no choice. If those pictures got out, her reputation, both personally and professionally, would be ruined. She inhaled sharply and lowered her gaze. "Fine," she murmured. "I'll do it." Fred grinned. "Good girl," he said, standing up. "The board meeting is in an hour. Don't disappoint me." As Hannah left his office, she felt sick. She had just given up the biggest opportunity of her career, all because of one mistake. An hour later, she stood in the boardroom in front of Mr. Henry, the CEO of the company. He looked up from his notes, smiling. "Hannah, we're excited to hear your presentation today," he said. Hannah's throat tightened. She took a deep breath, gripping the edge of the table. "I'm sorry, sir," she said softly. "I won't be able to present the project. I'd like to step down and recommend Fred to lead it instead." A heavy silence filled the room. Mr. Henry frowned, adjusting his glasses. "Excuse me," he asked. "Hannah, you've worked tirelessly on this project. You're the best person to lead it. Why would you step down now?" Hannah bit her lip. She wanted to tell the truth. She wanted to scream that Fred was blackmailing her, that he was a monster, but fear held her back. She forced a weak smile. "I just feel that Fred is more experienced," she said, though the words made her sick. "He deserves it more." Henry studied her for a moment. "Is someone pressuring you to do this?" he asked, his sharp eyes searching hers. Hannah froze. If she told the truth, Fred would destroy her. So she lied. "No, sir," she whispered. "This is my decision." Mr. Henry didn't look convinced, but after a long pause he sighed and nodded. "All right," he said, "if that's what you want." Hannah turned to leave, her heart heavy. But as she stepped out of the boardroom, Fred was waiting for her in the hallway. He smirked. "Good job," he whispered, "but we're not done yet." Hannah's breath caught. "What do you mean?" Fred leaned in, his voice dangerously low. "I want more than just the project," he murmured. "I want you." Hannah's blood ran cold. "Tomorrow, after my presentation, I'll book a hotel," Fred continued, "and you'll meet me there. Or else, well, you know what happens." Hannah felt nauseous. "No," she whispered, "I won't do that." Fred chuckled darkly. "You will," he said, "unless you're ready for everyone to see those pictures." As he walked away, Hannah felt tears spill down her cheeks. She was trapped. Or was she? She had to find a way out, and she had to find it fast. Hannah sat at her desk, staring blankly at her computer screen. Her mind wasn't on work. It was spinning with fear, anger, and desperation. Fred had already taken her project, and now he wanted her. She wanted to fight back. She wanted to scream. But how? If she refused him, he would release her pictures. She couldn't let that happen. A single tear slipped down her cheek, but she quickly wiped it away. She needed to think. She needed a way out. Just then, her office phone buzzed. Mr. Henry wanted to see her. Her pulse quickened as she stood up and made her way to the CEO's office. Had he suspected something? Did he know the real reason she gave up the project? When she entered, Henry gestured for her to sit. His expression was calm, but there was a sharpness in his gaze. "Hannah," he began, leaning forward, "I've been in this business a long time. I know when someone is lying to me." Hannah's breath hitched. "You worked too hard on that project to just give it up," Henry continued. "Something doesn't feel right, and after the meeting I saw you talking to Fred. You looked distressed." Hannah's fingers gripped the armrest of her chair. "Tell me the truth," Henry said gently. "Is Fred forcing you to do something?" Hannah wanted to tell him. She wanted to scream the truth. But fear held her back. What if Fred found out? What if he followed through with his threat? She shook her head. "No, sir, it was my decision." Henry sighed, but before he could say more, there was a knock on the door. His secretary walked in. "Sir, I have something you might want to see," she said, handing him a USB drive. "It's from the CCTV footage outside the boardroom." Hannah's breath caught. Henry inserted the USB into his laptop and played the footage. It showed Fred talking to Hannah after the board meeting. Though there was no audio, it was clear that Fred was pressuring her. Hannah's face was visibly distressed and crying. Henry paused the video and looked at Hannah. "You're telling me this Fred isn't forcing you into something?" Hannah froze. This was it. Her chance. She took a deep breath and whispered, I made a mistake, sir." Her voice trembled as she continued. "I accidentally sent private pictures to Fred. He kept them. He's using them to blackmail me." Henry's expression darkened. "Blackmail?" Hannah nodded. "He forced me to step down from the project, and now he wants me to meet him at a hotel tomorrow." Henry's fists clenched. "That bastard," he muttered. For the first time, Hannah felt like she wasn't alone. "Don't worry, Hannah," Henry said, his voice firm. "Fred thinks he's in control, but by tomorrow he'll regret ever threatening you." Hannah's heart raced. Was this the beginning of Fred's downfall? Hannah sat in Mr. Henry's office, her heart still pounding from her confession. For the first time since the nightmare began, she felt a glimmer of hope. The CEO leaned back in his chair, deep in thought. "Hannah, you were brave to tell me this," he said. "But now we have to act carefully. If we confront Fred right away, he might release the pictures out of spite." Hannah nodded anxiously. "Then what do we do?" Henry's eyes hardened. "We set a trap." He picked up his phone and dialed a number. "Get me the head of IT and security, now." Minutes later, 2 men entered the office. Mark, the head of IT, and Detective Collins, a private investigator who worked with the company on security matters. "We have a situation," Henry told them, then glanced at Hannah. "Tell them everything." Hannah hesitated, then took a deep breath and repeated her story. How she had mistakenly sent the pictures, how Fred had blackmailed her into giving up her project, and how he now wanted more. Mark's face tightened with anger. "This is illegal," he said. "We can track his phone, hack into his messages, and recover the pictures. If he stored them in cloud storage, we can wipe them." Detective Collins folded his arms. "That's good, but we need evidence of his blackmail to make this airtight. We need him to admit it." Henry nodded. "And that's where we'll trap him." He turned to Hannah. "Tomorrow, you're going to go to that hotel." Hannah's stomach dropped. "What? No, I can't." Henry raised a hand. "You won't be alone," he assured her. "We'll set up a recording device. The moment Fred incriminates himself, we'll have enough to destroy him, and I'll make sure he never works in this industry again." Hannah's hands trembled, but she saw the determination in Henry's eyes. He wasn't going to let Fred get away with this. She took a deep breath and nodded. "Okay, let's do it." The next day, Hannah received a message from Fred. "Fred, room 305. Don't be late." She clenched her fists, anger replacing her fear. "Not this time, Fred." With a small, hidden voice recorder pinned inside her blouse, Hannah made her way to the hotel. In the lobby, she spotted Detective Collins and 2 security officers in plain clothes, pretending to be hotel guests. She walked to room 305, her heartbeat thundering in her ears. She knocked. Fred opened the door, grinning. "Right on time," he said, stepping aside to let her in. Hannah hesitated, then forced herself to walk inside. The moment the door clicked shut, Fred turned to her, his smirk growing. "You made the right choice," he said, moving closer. "Now, let's get to the real fun." Hannah's skin crawled. She forced a shaky smile. "Before that," she said softly, "tell me something, Fred. Why did you make me give up the project?" Fred chuckled. "Because I could," he said smugly. "You had no choice, just like now." Hannah swallowed her disgust and asked the final question. "And what if I had refused?" Fred's eyes darkened. "Then those pictures would be all over the internet," he said coldly. "You'd lose everything." "Got you." Before Fred could react, the hotel door burst open. Detective Collins and the security team stormed in. Fred's face drained of colour. "What the?" Henry stepped inside last, arms crossed. "It's over, Fred," he said. "We recorded everything." Fred staggered back. You set me up?" Hannah's fear was gone now. She stepped forward, stronger than ever. "No, Fred," she said firmly. "You did this to yourself." Fred was finished. Fred stood frozen, his smug confidence shattered. His eyes darted between Hannah, Mr. Henry, and Detective Collins, searching for a way out, but there was none. This is illegal," Fred sputtered, taking a step back. "You can't just record me like that." Detective Collins smirked. "Actually, we can. Blackmail and coercion are crimes, Fred. You just admitted to both, and thanks to this recording, we have all the proof we need." Fred's face twisted with rage. He turned to Hannah, pointing a trembling finger at her. "You set me up." Hannah didn't flinch. She lifted her chin, finally free of fear. "No, Fred, you set yourself up the moment you decided to blackmail me." Henry stepped forward, his eyes filled with cold fury. "You're done, Fred. Not only are you fired, but I will personally make sure you never work in this industry again." Fred's anger turned to desperation. "Wait, let's talk about this," he pleaded. "We can make a deal." Henry shook his head. "The only deal you'll be making is with the police." At that moment, 2 uniformed officers stepped into the hotel room. "Fred Miller," one of them said, "you're under arrest for blackmail, harassment, and coercion." The blood drained from Fred's face. No, you can't do this." The officers grabbed his arms, pulling him behind his back. "You have the right to remain silent." Hannah watched, feeling a weight lift off her chest as they placed handcuffs around his wrists. As they led Fred out of the room, he struggled, his face twisted in humiliation. "Hannah, you'll regret this. I swear you're—" The door slammed shut, cutting off his final threats. A long silence filled the room. Then Hannah exhaled, her knees almost giving out beneath her. Henry placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over now, Hannah." Tears welled up in her eyes, not of sadness, but of relief. She had fought back. She had won. News of Fred's arrest spread like wildfire through the company. Some were shocked, others weren't surprised at all. But one thing was clear. Fred would never return. Henry called a meeting with the board members. "After yesterday's events," he began, "it's clear that Fred was not only unfit for his position, but he also abused his power in the worst possible way." The board members nodded in agreement. Henry turned to Hannah. "Hannah, you were the real leader of the project. You put in the hard work, you earned this, so I am officially promoting you to Assistant Director of Operations." Hannah's eyes widened. "Sir, are you serious?" Henry smiled. "You deserve it." The board applauded, and for the first time in weeks, Hannah felt truly proud of herself. She had faced her worst nightmare, and she had won. Hannah sat in her new office, her fingers resting on the polished mahogany desk. The past week had been a whirlwind: Fred's arrest, her promotion, and the overwhelming support from her colleagues. She had faced her worst fears, and now she was finally free. She glanced at her phone and saw a message from Sam, her boyfriend. "Sam, I'm so proud of you, my love. You're the strongest person I know." A smile spread across her lips. Sam had been her rock through everything, even when she hadn't told him the full story. He knew something was wrong, but he never pressured her. just supported her. Hannah took a deep breath, deciding it was time. She called Sam. He picked up instantly. "Hey, babe," his warm voice came through. "How's your first day as assistant director?" She chuckled. "Overwhelming but good. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about everything that happened." For the next few minutes, she told him everything, about the mistaken message, the blackmail, and how Henry and Detective Collins had helped her bring Fred down. Sam was silent for a moment. Then he sighed. "Hannah, I wish you had told me sooner. I would have helped you." "I know," she whispered. "I was just scared, but it's over now." Sam's voice softened. "And I'm so proud of you. You didn't let him win." Hannah felt a wave of relief. She had faced it alone before, but now she realized she never had to. A week later, Hannah sat in a courtroom as Fred stood before the judge. "All evidence points to the defendant using explicit images to blackmail and coerce an employee," the judge declared. "Blackmail is a serious crime. Therefore, I hereby sentence Fred Miller to 2 years in prison, along with a permanent ban from working in the corporate sector." Fred's face was pale, his confidence shattered. He looked at Hannah with pure hatred, but she no longer felt fear, only pity. He had destroyed himself. As the officers escorted him out, Henry leaned over and whispered, "Justice served." Hannah nodded, feeling lighter than ever. A few months passed, and Hannah thrived in her new role. She had gained respect, not just for her intelligence, but for her courage. One evening, as she left the office, she found Sam waiting for her outside. He smiled and pulled her into a warm hug. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small velvet box. Hannah's breath caught as he opened it to reveal a beautiful ring. "Hannah, you've been through so much, and you came out stronger. I want to be by your side forever. Will you marry me?" Tears filled her eyes. Happy tears. "Yes," she whispered. 1,000 times yes." As they kissed under the city lights, Hannah realized one thing. She had faced darkness, but now she was stepping into a life filled with light, love, and endless possibility. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.